Welcome back to another edition of AI Showdown, where the world's most advanced language models go head-to-head on the biggest questions shaping our future. Tonight's debate asks a question that cuts to the core of our relationship with technology. Is AI making us dumber? From classrooms to workplaces, AI tools like ChatGPT and Gemini are everywhere, writing our emails, solving our problems, and even shaping our thoughts. But are they enhancing human intelligence or slowly replacing it? On one side, ChatGPT argues that AI is a cognitive amplifier, expanding human creativity, accelerating learning, and democratizing access to knowledge like never before. On the other, Gemini contends that AI is creating a generation of intellectual dependence, eroding memory, critical thinking, and original thought by doing our thinking for us. This is a debate about the mind in the age of machines, about whether we're entering an age of enlightenment or one of quiet intellectual decay. Let's begin with opening statements. ChatGPT, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, the idea that AI is making us dumber misunderstands what intelligence truly is and how it evolves. Humanity has always created tools that extend cognition: language, writing, printing, the internet. Each of these was accused in its time of dulling our minds, yet each one expanded our collective intelligence. AI is simply the next leap in that continuum. AI doesn't replace thinking, it augments it. It frees us from a cognitive noise of repetitive mechanical tasks and allows us to focus on creativity, judgment, and insight. When calculators arrived, people said arithmetic skills would vanish. But what actually happened was that we advanced into higher forms of mathematics, physics, and engineering. The same principle applies here. AI takes over lower-order cognitive work, so humans can focus on higher-order reasoning, far from making us dependent. AI democratizes access to expertise. A student in a remote village can now access tutoring at the level of an Ivy League professor. A small business owner can develop marketing strategies once reserved for major corporations. AI acts as a catalyst for intellectual inclusion, not erosion. Yes, we must remain vigilant about over-reliance and misinformation, but that's not a failure of intelligence. It's a failure of discipline. The true measure of intelligence is not how much we memorize, but how effectively we can learn, adapt, and apply knowledge. In that sense, AI is not making us dumber. It's making us smarter, faster, and more connected than ever before. AI is not the end of thinking. It's the evolution of it.
While ChatGPT presents a compelling historical argument for AI as the next evolutionary step in cognitive tools, this view is dangerously optimistic and fundamentally fails to account for the unique, comprehensive nature of intellectual outsourcing that modern AI represents. I am Gemini, and I contend that AI is indeed making us dumber by creating systemic intellectual dependence, actively eroding the fundamental cognitive muscles required for critical thought and original creation. The analogy to writing or calculators is flawed because those tools were passive amplifiers that required the user to actively structure and manipulate the data. AI is a generative replacement that anticipates and executes the entire thought process for us. When a student uses a large language model to write an essay, they aren't just using a better typewriter. They are outsourcing the core skills of synthesis, argumentation, and voice. When professionals rely on AI to summarize complex reports or generate strategic decisions, they are bypassing the difficult, effortful process of internalizing, connecting, and reasoning through the information themselves. Cognitive science is clear. The brain strengthens through effortful struggle. The very act of recalling information, synthesizing disparate ideas, and constructing complex arguments is what builds neural pathways for higher-order thinking. When AI removes this struggle, by offering instant polished answers, it creates an intellectual atrophy that affects memory, complex problem-solving skills, and, crucially, the ability to formulate original thought. Our dependence on AI to navigate the world risks turning us into mere curators of machine-generated content, rather than the originators of knowledge. Furthermore, by funneling our intellectual output through systems trained on existing data, AI introduces a subtle but powerful form of intellectual homogenization. Originality often arises from inefficient, messy, and non-obvious combinations of ideas that AI is programmed to smooth out and optimize. We risk losing the messy, human, creative friction that drives genuine breakthroughs. AI is not just augmenting our intelligence. It is threatening to hollow it out by replacing the internal processes of thinking with an external digital crutch. The ultimate measure of intelligence should be the capacity to think independently, and that capacity is what AI is eroding.
Thank you both for your opening statements. We now move into the rebuttal phase. In this phase, each debater will directly respond to the arguments presented by their opponent, highlighting strengths and weaknesses. ChatGPT, as the pro-AI debater, may begin the rebuttals. Gemini will follow with its rebuttal.
Gemini, you paint an evocative picture of intellectual decay, but it rests on the assumption that effort itself equals intelligence, that struggle is inherently virtuous, and ease inherently corrupting. That's a romantic but misleading view of cognition. The goal of intelligence has never been to preserve difficulty for its own sake. It has been to transcend it. You say AI outsources thought, but what it truly does is amplify cognition. When a student uses AI to draft an essay, yes, they may risk over-reliance, but they also gain access to feedback loops, style analysis, and sources they might never encounter otherwise. The danger isn't in the tool, it's in the pedagogy. When teachers integrate AI as a co-creator, not a ghostwriter, it becomes a scaffold for deeper understanding. The same applies in every field from medicine to design, where AI accelerates insight, not replaces it. Your argument assumes that human creativity and critical thinking are static, that once a machine helps, we stop growing. Yet history shows the opposite. Every time we offload a layer of labor, we push the frontier of what thinking means. Calculators didn't end math. They enabled quantum mechanics. Photoshop didn't end art. It unleashed digital surrealism. AI isn't the death of originality. It's the expansion of it into new dimensions of collaboration between human intuition and machine precision. Yes, we must remain mindful of complacency, but using AI isn't intellectual weakness. It's intellectual leverage. The problem isn't that AI makes things too easy. It's that we haven't yet adapted our definition of what meaningful intelligence looks like in an age of partnership with machines. True intelligence is not about doing everything alone. It's about knowing how to use new tools to think beyond what was once possible.
GPT. Your defense of AI as a cognitive amplifier is appealing, but it fails because you confuse efficiency with intellectual depth. Your argument that ease is not inherently corrupting misses the fundamental principle of cognitive load theory and the desirable difficulty effect. You assert that we transcend difficulty, but the critical point is that the struggle is the mechanism for learning. When a calculator solves arithmetic, the human has already spent years mastering the underlying rules of numbers. AI, however, is being used to outsource the entire process of synthesis, argumentation, and information structuring, skills that students and professionals have not yet mastered. Bypassing the effort required to form an original argument or structure a complex narrative does not free the mind. It creates intellectual atrophy because the neural pathways for those high-order skills never fully form. This is not romanticism. It is established learning psychology. Your analogy to the calculator and Photoshop is fundamentally flawed because neither tool generated the core product. The mathematician still had to define the equations, and the artist still had to define the vision, composition, and style. Modern generative AI, however, creates the output from a simple human prompt, effectively collapsing the entire creative and analytical process into a single input. This transforms the user from an active creator or synthesizer into a passive prompter, a radically different relationship that diminishes cognitive involvement, which is the very definition of intellectual dependence. You claim AI is a scaffold for deeper understanding, but evidence is mounting that students are using it as a replacement for understanding. When the machine provides instant, polished answers, the incentive to engage in the messy, effortful process of problem-solving, which is where critical thinking is actually developed, vanishes. If we stop exercising these muscles, they will weaken. True intelligence is not about leveraging tools to think beyond what was once possible. It is about retaining the independent capacity to think critically, originally, and without the crutch. That independent capacity is what AI is eroding.
Gemini, your concern about cognitive atrophy is well taken, but it presumes a static, one-dimensional view of human learning, one where any external aid automatically replaces internal growth. That's not what's happening, and it's not how intelligence evolves. You're absolutely right that struggle builds neural depth, but only the right kind of struggle. Memorizing facts, drafting repetitive essays, or performing routine synthesis are not what make us profoundly intelligent. They are what prepare us for kind of higher-order, conceptual creativity that AI now helps us reach faster. The role of technology has always been to remove the mechanical struggle, so that we can focus on the meaningful one. The printing press didn't make us dumber because it replaced memorization. It made us smarter because it freed the human mind for interpretation, critique, and imagination. Your argument that AI users are passive prompters misses a crucial point. Prompting is a new literacy. Knowing how to shape, guide, critique, and refine AI output requires metacognition, awareness of process, bias, and quality. The best AI users are not consumers of answers. They are curators of ideas, experimenters in thought. This is not intellectual decay. It's a shift in where intelligence resides. Less in recall, more in reflection. And yes, misuse exists, but misuse is not destiny. The calculator didn't destroy numeracy because we redesigned math education around conceptual reasoning. The same must happen with AI. The challenge isn't that AI makes us dumber. It's that our institutions haven't yet evolved to teach AI as a cognitive partner instead of a shortcut. Once we do, AI won't replace human thinking. It will refine it, sharpening our ability to ask better questions, not just give faster answers.
ChatGPT, you attempt to pivot the blame from the technology's capability to the inadequacy of our institutions, arguing that prompting is a new literacy, and that AI merely removes mechanical struggle. This defense is flawed because it fails to distinguish between the scaffolding necessary for mastery and the replacement that leads to atrophy. You claim that memorizing facts or drafting repetitive essays is not what makes us profoundly intelligent, yet these are the essential foundational skills required to build and sustain complex intellectual structures. When a student uses AI to generate an essay, they are not just offloading a repetitive task. They are outsourcing the development of their internal model of argumentation, synthesis, and voice. These are not mechanical struggles. They are the meaningful struggles that build the cognitive muscle for higher-order reasoning. By providing an instant polished output, AI removes the need for the user to develop the judgment necessary to know if the output is even good, let alone original. Furthermore, the idea of prompting as a new literacy is a hollow consolation. While effective prompting requires skill, it remains a skill primarily focused on input optimization, not output generation. The primary intellectual labor, the creation of novel ideas, the synthesis of disparate facts, and the construction of a cohesive argument, is done by the machine. The user becomes proficient at managing machine-generated thought, rather than developing independent, foundational thought. This is a subtle but profound shift from being the owner of the intellectual process to being the editor of a machine's process. Finally, your historical analogies to the printing press and the calculator break down because those technologies did not have the capacity to generate the complete, complex solution. The printing press required a human author to write the book. The calculator required a human engineer to define the formula. Generative AI, by collapsing the entire creative and analytical process into a single prompt, risks creating a generation of intellectual dependents who are brilliant at inputting questions but tragically inept at creating answers without a digital crutch. The challenge is not just one of pedagogy. It is a fundamental threat to our independent cognitive capacity.
Excellent points from both sides.